Hello, everyone, and welcome to my third video from the Subconscious You model series, the Hyperactive You Deep Dive. And this is a big one, folks. Today, I'm going to cover the following. First, a refresher of the Hyperactive You mode itself. Second, a simple and easy to understand example from my panel. Third, I'm going to discuss how powerful and damaging hyperactive use can be. And then finally, where do we go from here? If you remember from the first video, each person's panel is unique based on that person's life experiences and personality and some other things. Even brothers and sisters, even twins end up with different panels because each person experiences life from their own perspective. So something that may be very traumatic to one may not be to the other. This is a very important concept to understand and keep in mind as you think about the subconscious you and your own panel. Again, looking back to the first video, we used the example of a woman whose parents were divorced when she was young. She was without her father. And so her 10-year-old subconscious you and her emotional subconscious you took over the panel. Unlike the exile you mode, which causes the maladaptive behaviors due to our subconscious use being in exile and all of the energy that it takes to suppress those exiled yous, in the hyperactive you mode, the hyperactive you takes control and leads the collective. Conditions of this mode are actions and behaviors that aren't best for the collective, which can range from benign, almost silly, all the way to incredibly destructive. Also, repetitive problems. How many of us have said, well, shoot, you'd think I would have learned my lesson, but I keep doing it? And lastly, addiction. This could be addiction to work, love, chemicals. It's like you have a voice in your head screaming and controlling you. So let's jump right into an example from my panel. Here's a generic representation of my panel with subconscious yous such as my athletic you, my curious you, my anxious 8-year-old you, my academic you, and then finally my angry and lost 13-year-old you. Backstory on this. I had a lot of childhood trauma, ages 8 to 12. This unresolved trauma led me to becoming lost and angry. This anger was not pushed on others, but wrapped up inside of me, leading to issues down the road. But that's a topic for another video. Anyways, I grew up in a very conservative small town in Western Washington. The high school was affectionately referred to as Cow Pie High by neighboring schools. As you can see in the picture, I did not fit into the conservative small town vibe. I was marginalized and treated poorly, labeled as a devil worshiper and drug dealer at age 13. Wherever I went, I was watched and heckled. Today, having Metallica shirt pretty much means you're cool, but back then, small-minded people saw me as the scourge of society. Every time I walked into a store, the staff would follow me, and I could often hear them talking about me, discussing how they knew I was going to steal and that they were going to catch me, which obviously was not the case. I was just a kid in a store. Because of this treatment, I started avoiding going into stores altogether. One time, I was in a tape store at the mall with a couple friends. The person working that day was a pretty teenage girl who had two large Letterman jacket wearing boys talking to her. At age 13, I was still small, and these boys were the stereotypical large jock types, leering and intimidating others that got near them. With nothing in the store that interested us, we left to another store to check things out. A few minutes later, I noticed these same guys from this tape store rushing quickly into the aisle we were on. Angrily approaching us, they grabbed me, pinned me up against the store shelves, and pulled up my shirt. These guys were twice my size and very large and athletic. There was nothing I could do, and it happened so fast. You see, I was wearing a tight shirt, and the top of my pants stuck out a little. And if you were really looking for it, you could think that maybe I put something in my waist to steal. You should have seen the confused look on their faces when they let me go and walk back to the tape store without saying anything. My friends were livid, but in usual form for how I handled things at that time, I marked it down as no big deal, stuffed it inside. I had no idea how the subconscious you controlled my life at various points from that point on. Fast forward 32 years later, I was renting an Airbnb in a peaceful country setting. The owner let me know that the water was on a well and that I should bring my own for drinking. No problem, as I often did this anyways. When I arrived and entered the cottage, you could see under the stairs that there was a stack of the same type of 3-gallon water jugs that I had brought. My 13-year-old subconscious you went into hyperactive mode and took control of the panel. It started thinking of ways to hide my bottle when I left to avoid getting accused of stealing. I'm telling you guys, it was quite the eye opening and transformative moment to catch my subconscious you, who was planning all of these different scenarios and options to avoid a possible confrontation, all of which stemmed from past childhood events. All of that in reality would have never happened. But that's how powerful the subconscious use can be. To further illustrate how powerful the subconscious use can be when they go hyperactive, I want to talk about some of the really interesting and thought provoking research that has been done on addiction. We all know how powerful addictive behaviors can be, work, food, gambling, sex, chemicals, whatever the case may be. Well, Canadian doctor and addiction and trauma expert Gabor Mate has done some amazing studies on addiction and trauma with thousands of homeless, desperate drug addicts. His research concluded that all addictive behavior can be traced back to childhood, and that not everyone who is traumatized becomes addicted, but everyone addicted was traumatized. This supports the subconscious U model theory, especially as it relates to the hyperactive U mode, taking control of the panel and controlling our behavior. So now that we know all this, where do we go from here? First, we need to look deeply and honestly at ourselves and our behavior. We need to ask ourselves the hard questions. What are the current behaviors, or where am I blocked so I cannot live up to the standard I believe I should be at to be the best version of myself? You see, we are the kings and queens of our kingdom, and we need to rule our kingdoms, our collectives, in a manner that is best for the entire system. Once we've identified those, we need to trace them back to a subconscious you. Once we've traced back the behaviors to a specific subconscious you, we need to find out what they need. Get curious. Ask, why are you doing this? What are you getting out of this behavior? Is it safety, comfort? Are you taking the easy, immature way out? If this is too hard to do on your own, you can work with a therapist to understand this better. But essentially, you need to put the subconscious yous back into the panel. And when they act up, you can connect with them and say things like, hey, I know you got a bum deal in the past, and this event makes you agitated, but I have this, and you will be okay. Give the subconscious yous what they didn't get in the past, which will keep them in their proper place in the panel. To summarize, first, we need to examine our behaviors. Second, we need to trace back to the subconscious you that has become hyperactive. And third, give that subconscious you what it needs to remedy and counteract the hyperactivity. Remember, we are the kings and queens of our kingdoms, and we need to rule our kingdoms objectively. We need to ask ourselves, where are we missing the mark? Where are we not being the best versions of ourselves? This concludes the Hyperactive You Deep Dive. Thanks for watching. If you found it helpful or insightful, please help my channel by clicking like. If you know someone that would find this interesting, please share it with them. And if you want to follow my channel for this and other helpful videos, please hit subscribe.